Welcome to the Nonfiction Writers, podcasting in a great way. I'm Ryan Aber, joined by Jason Kersey. Jason, here we are on Sunday evening, not too long after the Oklahoma's bowl destination was announced. They'll play Clemson in the Russell Athletic Bowl, December 29th. What are your initial thoughts of the Russell Athletic Bowl?
Well, my initial thoughts about the game are that it's an interesting matchup with Brent Venables. My initial thought about the bowl, though, is a little bit tainted because of the cluster of a conference call we just had.
And to set it up, we're on a conference call. Jason and I were here in the same room together at my house and more. We're both listening on our earbuds with the call on mute, like you're supposed to do if it's an open call, which it is, and somebody makes the unfortunate decision to put the call on hold.
Yeah, and so basically, in the middle of one of Bob Stoops' answers, there's just elevator music, and we're we're just trying to figure out what's going on, and eventually Bob just hung up, and that was the end. So we hadn't had a chance yet to ask about Samaje Perine's status, or Adam Shedd's status, or Sterling Shepard's status. So,
or how Bob Stoops voted in the coaches poll.
There were a lot of questions to still be asked that weren't asked because the call was put on hold.
Yeah, and Jason, you had a tweet just a few minutes ago that sort of summed up everything. You said, so far, OU's bowl has failed a conference call. That's the kind of bowl you get, though, when you miss extra points and punt to Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, let's talk about Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, I mean, why don't we? There's all kinds of stuff to talk about in the Bedlam game, 38-35 Oklahoma loss in overtime. But it has to start with the decision to re-kick with a 1:01 left. You have Oklahoma State pinned at the 15. They're going to have to go with a freshman quarterback, an offensive line that has struggled all year, and Oklahoma had gotten decent pressure. Now, they hadn't sacked Mason Rudolph much because he'd been able to be elusive and dance around in the pocket a little bit, but they'd gotten pretty good pressure on him. Instead, you decide to re-kick to save 8 seconds, as Bob Stoops said, to one of, if not the most dynamic punt returner and kick returner in the game, and Tyreek Hill just blows by several Oklahoma defenders on the way to the end zone.
Yeah, it was kind of unbelievable that that they made the decision to re-kick. I think everybody was a little bit baffled by that. I mean, in the explanation, 8 seconds, and we might pin them a little bit deeper. I mean, if OSU was going to go 90, if they were going to go 85 yards and score, they would have been able to go 90 yards and score, or 95 yards and score.
And I don't think Oklahoma State is going 85 yards with all those things I mentioned, the offensive line that had struggled all year, a freshman quarterback making a second start. I mean, really all you've got to do is account for Shepard for Oklahoma State and, keep a decent eye on Hill, and you're golden and you go win, and they're probably still headed to the Russell Athletic Bowl, but the feeling around the team is much different.
Oh, yeah. I mean, losing this game yesterday was it was bad. It was really, really bad. I mean, this Oklahoma State has had, not a very good season, to say the least, and lost 5 straight games by 21 points or more, and then they come into Norman and win, and, 3 home losses this year, 1-3, is that right, in Big 12 play at home? Man, this season, this is without question the most disappointing season in the Stoops era, and I don't even think it's close anymore.
No, I mean 2005
it already was, and now it's just...
Yeah. I mean, 2005 is the only other one that you could even think about making an argument for, but there were so many circumstances that year that made it where you were either encouraged for the future or could see where things fell apart. This team, I mean, you look, I did my all Big 12 team earlier today, and there were several OU players on it. They had a lot of good players, and they have a lot of good players, but it's just not a very good team right now.
No, it's just not. I mean, the player, like you said, it's so weird that they have so many good players. They just don't have great players in
the right spots,
in certain spots where they need them. They don't have any receivers, and they don't have any defensive backs, and they don't have a quarterback right now. And I think I think it was you that said it before. Like, of all the things you cannot be lacking on in the Big 12, it's it's wide receivers and defensive backs. I think that was you that said that. It was somebody.
Yeah, and we've talked about it a ton over the last few months as it's become apparent that OU didn't have either of those things. They had one at each spot, and that was Sterling Shepard, who's been out for most of the last, month and 5 weeks with injury. Keeps coming back and trying to play one series or one play, and then he, leaves the game almost immediately once it starts. And then on the other side, Zach Sanchez. I mean, you can't discount what Zach Sanchez has done. Now, teams haven't had much of a reason to test him very much because they've been able to be so successful on the other side with whether it's Julian Wilson or Jordan Thomas or anybody else, really.
Yeah, I mean, and poor Zach Sanchez, man, that guy really has had a really good season. I mean, he had a couple games, but I think you have to remember he had one arm basically. I mean, one of his shoulders was hurting, and but since then he's been good. He intercepted a pass yesterday that should have clinched the game. All you had to do was get one first down after that, and the game's over. And the fact that they couldn't, and then we all know what happened from there. It's unbelievable, and it was unbelievable that the offense fell apart the way they did after Pirine and then Keith Ford went down. Because with Pirine, I mean, obviously he's such a great player, but after a few bad series, Keith Ford had that 54-yard run and or 56-yard run, and really seemed to be getting going. Maybe. I think maybe the thought at that point is, well, they've at least got one running back that can do this. Alex Ross can't run that way, and when they lost,
you have to get Alex Ross in space, and when you're able to load the box against a run and really bear down against it, he's not the kind of back who's going to be able to grind it out like Pirine does, like Keith Ford is able to do at times as well.
Yeah, and I mean that was the difference. And then when you add in the fact that you have a quarterback who is not throwing the ball well right now, and you have receivers that aren't getting open, and then Keith Ford, he was the best receiver I think out there yesterday. And so you lose him as a running back and as a receiver. It's bad. It was bad. There's just no way we could have predicted that the team would be this bad this year.
Just judging on yesterday, where is OU in worse shape? Is it at quarterback with Cody Thomas not able to get the ball consistently to the receivers, or is it at receiver where without Sterling Shepard, they really look lost? I mean, Cody Thomas, his stats as far as completions yesterday don't look too bad really, but you look a little bit deeper in it, it's a lot of his completions went to running backs, tight ends. I mean, Keith Ford was their leading receiver with 3 catches, 34 yards. Blake Bell, 2 catches, 59 yards. But the only receivers that caught balls, Jordan Smallwood had an 11-yard catch, and Micaiah Quick had a 2-yard loss on a catch. Those are the only two wide receivers who made plays yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, how did Deron Neal not get open at all? How did it's unbelievable. It's so shocking. Like I really can't believe what has happened to this team this year. I mean, the first loss TCU, you could. I mean, and obviously they've wound up being really good.
Yeah,
and you can justify. And Kansas State's a good team. They still should have won that game with field goals and extra points. Yeah. And then the Baylor game, they were never in. They were clearly not as good a team. It should have been closer than that. But then this game, this is the game where
this is the one where you're just like, huh?
Yeah. But I do have to say, Mason Rudolph,
he looked like a star in the making yesterday.
Yeah, he's big time. He's going to be good. I mean, I think we've talked before. I've always liked J.W. Walsh, but there's no question who needs to be the quarterback at OSU next year.
Yeah, I mean, the question for me on Oklahoma State now and hundreds and thousands of other people probably is what took so long?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair question. Who knows? I don't think that they would have beaten, well, they played Baylor with him. I don't think they would have beaten TCU.
But now, if Baylor was his second or even his third start, maybe that game he's more comfortable in, doesn't make some of the mistakes that he made in that game. I mean, that game was close late in the game.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, his first start was pretty good considering where he was and who he was playing, and I think they would have beat Texas at home with Mason Rudolph. So, just a weird season, man. Just a weird season.
No kidding. And we talk about weird season. We're not just talking about from 1st of September when they played Louisiana Tech. We're talking about really from the time summer opened. I mean, we had, Baker Mayfield transfer in here. We're scratching our heads wondering why in the world is he coming. All of a sudden, Kendall Thompson leaves for Utah. Blake Bell moves to tight end, and that picture starts to become clear. But you had the stadium expansion news that hit this summer. You had Joe Mixon and his legal problems that he had, and it just goes on and on and on about the strange season that it's been for OU.
Yeah, there's very few other ways to describe it. It's been weird and strange, and we I think everyone had these high expectations for them, and it just goes to show. I mean, you just never know. You just never know. And would things have been different with Dorial Green Beckham eligible? Perhaps.
Yeah, I mean that's the one that I really wonder about is what difference Dorial Green Beckham, if he was eligible, would have made, especially if Sterling Shepard goes down. You have somebody else out there to help Trevor Knight and help Cody Thomas make plays. But then you also wonder about Baker Mayfield, and I don't know. Right now, I'd probably say that Cody Thomas is the favorite almost to win the quarterback job next year. Now, who knows what Trevor Knight's status is, but that'll be certainly an interesting storyline to follow once we get past the bowls. But the DGB eligibility thing, I think, is the one that really stands out. I mean, we haven't even talked about Frank Shannon. I think that wouldn't have made that big a difference because Jordan Evans had such a good season on the interior.
Yeah, I think DGB is the one that you could sort of point at. I mean, now we know why they wanted him eligible so bad because, I mean, outside of Sterling Shepard, they just don't have much at receiver right now, and I don't know how it's going to get any better. I mean, looking at next year, I mean, Deron Neal is going to be a senior next year. If he hasn't gotten it by now,
he's not. You don't think he's ever going to. Jordan Smallwood hadn't really gotten any run until yesterday. Makes that catch. Mekhi Quick and KJ Young, I think, are going to be decent on the slot, but neither of them has proved to be big-time playmakers. And then you're talking about a bunch of guys who were redshirting this year or coming on campus, and it's hard to expect those guys to contribute immediately.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a mess. I mean, at receiver, I don't know what they're going to do, and I think you expect that Sterling Shepard will be back next year, and perhaps Dorial Green Beckham will stay. I don't know if he's going to stay. I don't think anybody knows if he's going to stay. So there's that, but I mean, who's going to be the quarterback? I disagree. I don't think Cody Thomas is the favorite. I know I said that a few weeks ago. After yesterday, I don't see how he's the favorite. I mean, you can't blame yesterday on the weather.
No, absolutely not.
And after Pirine's injury, his completion percentage just plummeted. And
but I think that's more due to the fact that they had no receivers who were able to catch. I mean, now I think he missed Blake Bell, and we're going to talk about this in just a minute. But overtime, misses Blake Bell over the middle, had to take a sack, and then has a ball. I believe it might have been tipped, but I still think Blake Bell had an excellent shot of making the catch in overtime. But to have no receivers like that, he still finished 10 of 17. Not a great day. Obviously, they didn't ask him to do a ton, but he completed his first 8 passes yesterday. I just don't know, because we know how great his arm is. You and I know this. We've talked about it on several podcasts because we've seen it up close. But then to see him be able to run around when he's been freed to, he hasn't been free too much because of what they've done offensively with him the last couple weeks. But as he's been free to, I think he's been able to run around very well. So I just don't see where Trevor Knight is better than him in anything that's tangible. Now, I understand there's things that he does that could make him the guy, and obviously we're going to have, Baker Mayfield, Justice Hansen is going to have a chance too. But if I had to bet, I would say Cody Thomas right now.
I think I would say Trevor Knight. I think he'll get his job back, and if he's healthy, I think he'll get his job back. I think he'll get his job back for the bowl if he's healthy, because to me, Cody Thomas, the only thing he's done that's really demonstrated that he's better, that he's better than Trevor Knight is running the ball, running the zone read. But in terms of throwing the ball, in terms of having a legitimate threat throwing the ball, I mean, I just don't see it with Cody Thomas yet. And maybe he'll get better, but it was to the point yesterday where I think I asked you when we were standing down there on the field. It's so funny when we left the press box with 6 minutes left.
Yeah.
OU was winning by 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, it was
We
before
thought the game was
Shepard
over.
touchdown,
And so, so we, on our way down there after that touchdown, and they went 3 and out again. I think I said to you, why wouldn't you put Bell in at quarterback? Just do it. Just try it, see what happens.
Yeah.
Because surely he could have completed a pass and gotten a first down.
Well, it could have done that, and also I think with Blake Bell and Alex Ross and Eric Ripkowski if you run the Belldozer, you've got a much better chance of getting a first down than just a handoff to Alex Ross, who can't really work without space.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and talking about Trevor Knight again, but let's look at the Baylor game. And obviously Baylor is on a different level from the teams that Cody Thomas has faced the last few weeks. But Trevor Knight, without Sterling Shepard in that game, goes 12 of 27 with an interception, 146 yards. I still question, Cody Thomas's struggles, if it's really due to his decisions, the way he conducts his passing game, or if it's the fact that they just don't have any receivers right now, which would be the problem with Trevor Knight out there.
Yeah, I think that you could say the same thing, though, about Trevor Knight. And so to me, I would say Trevor Knight gets his job back and maybe loses it at some point. But I think going into next year, you have to believe that, at least I believe that he should be the guy at the top of the depth chart, and that could definitely change. I'm not sold on Baker Mayfield like some people are. He was not that great last year for Texas Tech. And that's the thing I think people forget. He lost his job in the middle of the year. He threw 9 interceptions.
Yeah. Although he was hurt, he lost his job because he was hurt, and then he just didn't get it back afterwards.
Yeah.
But yeah, he did have an interception problem. I think there's no doubt about that. Jason, we touched on it just a bit ago, but overtime, OU gets the ball first in overtime from the 25. They immediately go pass. Cody Thomas was sacked for a loss of 2 yards on the very first play. It was a play where he had looked like he had Blake Bell over the middle, had a chance to gain a lot of yards. The second play, they go back to Bell. Like I said, I think Blake Bell had an excellent chance to catch that. If so, he's got a chance to probably at least pick up a first down. And then, of course, they have to pass the next one, and it's an incomplete. They're called for holding. It's reviewed. They say that it's an incomplete. No, you misses a 44-yard field goal. Were you surprised that they came out in overtime trying to throw the ball?
I mean, what else were they going to do? They couldn't. Yeah. I mean, no. They tried to throw it to Bell, and that was the only guy I think they could count on in that moment. And I mean, they couldn't hand it off. I mean, they couldn't. They couldn't.
I mean, unless you did something like I said, go to the Belldozer with Ripkowski and Ford back there, and just blow it up like that.
So no,
with the offense that they were running, there was no way that they were going to move the ball on the ground.
Yeah. So no, I wasn't surprised.
Yeah, and I think that was their chance. And what a great story that would have been if Blake Bell would have caught a big time pass there. But obviously, that's not it. You get a great story on the other side. We like to tell really good stories, and regardless of, I know most of our listeners are OU fans, obviously, but it was certainly a wild finish last night in Stillwater.
Yeah.
Looking forward, Jason, we've touched on the bowl, the matchup with Clemson. I think it's going to be a really difficult matchup for Oklahoma. You mentioned Brent Venables. His defense is fantastic this year. I don't know how OU is going to be able to move the ball, especially through the air. I think Samaje Perine, if he's back healthy, will make a big difference for OU. I'm not sure if it makes enough of a difference for them to win this game, but just what's your early thoughts on Clemson's defense?
Well, I mean, they're ranked number 1 in the country in total defense, so they're obviously doing something right. I think, I think it'll be tough. Now, I do think that you have to remember, though, when you're looking at them being the number 1 total defense, that they play in the ACC. There's not a whole lot of great teams in that conference. And when they played Florida State, Jameis Winston didn't play. So I think you sort of have to remember that, although, I mean, having said that, I don't know that OU's offense is any better than – they're certainly not as good as Florida State with Jameis Winston. So I don't know. But obviously they've had a good year, and I think it's a tough matchup for OU too. I think that it's going to be tough for them to win this game.
They played a pretty good schedule. I mean, they lost to Georgia real early in the season, lost 2 of their first 3 games to Georgia and Florida State early. 23-17, they lost to Florida State. Like you said, that was without Jameis Winston. Beat Louisville, which is a pretty solid win, not a great win. Lost to Georgia Tech late in the season. Beat South Carolina at the end. Obviously, South Carolina was a team that was up there with OU as far as teams with the most disappointing seasons. So yeah, I don't think their schedule is, absolutely, horrifically weak. But at the same time, it wasn't the toughest of slates.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know really enough about Clemson at this point to have a strong opinion. I just think my first impression was I think that might be a tough matchup for OU, particularly if they don't get their offense figured out in this next month. Now, we know last time they had a month to prepare for a bowl game. Their offense came out and looked like nothing we've seen before. We'd seen up to that point. But so maybe this will be the same way. Maybe they'll come out and look great against Clemson. But at this point, at 4 losses in a bowl game that can't get a conference call right, I don't know. I think this might be tough for them.
All right, Jason, put out a call on Twitter right before we got this started saying, hey, we're doing this thing. Throw some questions at us. We'll just do one right now. There's several others that got thrown out, and there'll be a time and a place for those because we're going to be doing a couple more podcasts before the Russell Athletic Bowl. But the biggest one that people want to know our opinions on right now is staff changes.
Yeah.
Will there be changes to this coaching staff? And I think obviously it starts with the 2 coordinators.
Yeah, I think there have to be some changes. I don't know where. It's sort of hard to say. I don't think Heupel has been quite as bad as a lot of people think. I don't think he has a whole lot to work with, and maybe that's his fault. I think that partially is his fault.
Yeah.
His play calling has been bad at times, but it hadn't been terrible at other times.
It hadn't been as bad as I think a lot of people want to say. There have been a few head scratchers. I mean, the biggest one, probably, underutilization of Samaje Perine against Baylor. Going back to last year against Texas, not using the quarterback run game very much. But I think he's been a lot better than a lot of people have given him credit for this year. I was asked on one of our videos last Friday before the Bedlam game to rank the 4 coordinators that were involved in the game, and I had Josh Heupel first out of the 4. Now that's sort of that's damning with faint praise when you talk about Mike Stoops, Mike Yurcich, and Glenn Spencer being the other group. I had Glenn Spencer second, Mike Stoops last in that group, but I don't think Heupel has been as bad as a lot of people want to say. But it's going to be real difficult to get rid of either of these guys because of, 1, Josh Heupel's ties to the program historically, and 2, Mike Stoops' ties to Bob Stoops family-wise.
Yeah, you can forget about Mike going anywhere. He's not going anywhere. And his defense has not been good this year, and at a lot of points. But I also think that it's fair to say that you have to remember that the players are still fairly young back there. I mean, you have Sanchez has been good. Quentin Hayes
Yeah,
was,
but even Sanchez is really. I mean, Sanchez. Is
yeah,
just a sophomore.
but I mean, then you got to think about Julian Wilson was playing his first season at corner, and they thought that was going to work, and it really didn't. Jordan Thomas is a true freshman. Ahmad Thomas is a sophomore, never really played much before. Stephen Parker's young, but he showed some flashes yesterday that he could be pretty good. So I do think that maybe there's some room to grow there, and I don't know that it would be right to overreact and expect that Mike should be fired for this season, because you have to also remember that last season they were pretty good through a lot of the year. I mean, the defense is not why they lost to Baylor last year. I think we all can agree on that. In fact, the defense played
worn out by the end of that game.
The defense played really good against Baylor last year, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think the coach that people should keep an eye on is Jay Norvell. We've talked a little bit about this away from the podcast, but I mean, you look at the wide receiver development. You know, the biggest wide receiver he's brought in that's had the most success is a guy that he really didn't have to recruit much. Sterling Shepard was going to come to OU regardless.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not. I mean, yeah, I think that's one to watch potentially. The receivers are just baffling this year that they haven't developed, and that there aren't anybody of all those guys out there. There is not anybody that they can trot out there. I mean, it's incredible that they don't even think, a guy like Austin Bennett, who's been around, played some as a true freshman. Why wouldn't he get a shot? Well, maybe he's just not very good. We don't know. Jay's one of the nicest guys on the staff. He's one of the best coaches for us to deal with. And I wouldn't want to see him lose his job. But I do think that's something people need to at least consider as a possibility. I also, you look on the defensive side of the ball, Jerry Montgomery's safe. He's done a good job. Bobby Jack Wright's not going anywhere. But I think Tim Kish is somebody that you might have to think about, because the linebackers, the guys that they have out there now have played well, but they're not getting they're not recruiting linebackers well right now, and they're pretty thin back there. So to me, those are the two. I would say that, and Heupel, I think everybody looks at Heupel and assumes that he's on the outs or that he's on the hot seat, and maybe he is.
And then everybody thinks that he's going to get some head coaching job that's going to save OU from having to fire him.
Yeah, but I don't know that that's going to happen. I just think it's going to be hard I think that's going to be a really, really hard decision if Bob decides to make it, because, his ties with the program, not just with the program, but with the program under Stoops. Yeah. Jackie Schiff had pretty good ties with the program too, and he'd been there for a long time with Bob, but he didn't, Bob didn't coach him.
Yeah, and he didn't win him a national championship.
Yeah, so
with Bob Stoops as a coach. All right, Jason. Well, we'll have plenty of time to talk about OU football over the next few weeks, but let's talk about a topic near and dear to your heart, the college football playoff. We had some interesting discussions over the last couple weeks about this, but today we figured out how it's going to work in the end. Alabama was number 1. Oregon was number 2. Florida State, undefeated Florida State, the only undefeated team in college football, number 3. And number 4, Ohio State, after their big win over Wisconsin, leaving Baylor and TCU out. What do you think about the top 4?
It's fair. It's good. I think that, the thing about Ohio State is you have to remember they played a conference championship game against a pretty good Wisconsin team and beat them soundly with a third-string quarterback. This is something that we've talked about for a few months now, that the Big 12 could be in trouble without a conference championship game. And one of the common responses today to me has been, well, Baylor, Kansas State would have been the conference championship game, North and South, so that was no big deal. But the problem with that is both those teams would have had a 13th game. They would have played each other twice. That would have been another quality win. 2 quality wins for Baylor over Kansas State. So I think that it clearly made a difference, even if they are not going to say that it made a difference. Jeff Long, in his comments, without saying it, made it very clear that it makes a difference. They're going to have to do something about it. And so I think TCU and Baylor only have themselves to blame for getting left out. TCU for losing, for blowing that huge lead to Baylor. Baylor for playing a weak non-conference schedule and for losing on the road at West Virginia. I mean, those, if one of those things changes, they probably get in. And so, or if you add a conference championship game, but those programs could have helped themselves by doing things. And so I don't have a whole ton of sympathy for either one of them.
Bob Bowlesby, the Big 12 commissioner, on a call with ESPN, an interview that was broadcast on their selection show, said clearly the lack of a conference championship game hurt the Big 12. Gee, I wish somebody would have told me that before the season. You would have thought somebody would have asked about that before the season, or did they?
Yeah, somebody did.
And written about that before the season.
Somebody did that.
Who was that?
I don't know. Why don't you tell everybody so I don't sound arrogant?
Jason Kersey at Big 12 Media Days wrote about this very topic, how the lack of a championship game might hurt the Big 12 in the future, could hurt them as soon as this year. Bob Bowlesby sort of shrugged it off. You ask him a question at Big 12 Media Days about the One True Champion slogan and their tie-breaking procedures. He actually talked about that today on ESPN.
Yeah, they did. They showed, they put up his comments, his response to my question about One True Champion. They didn't put up his comments, his response to my question about the conference championship game costing them, which I thought were equally as interesting, frankly. But they put up about the One True Champion, and he basically said today, he misspoke, that of course we have co-champions, and but I think that in that moment, and hey, I give him credit for being honest today and saying he screwed up. I mean, that's because that's what he did. I mean, he messed up, and I think that in that moment, maybe he was thinking about trying to make sure he didn't embarrass anybody because of the. You remember that room? It was
yes.
One True Champion. You couldn't walk 5 feet.
The commercial played on a constant loop for about an hour before the first coach took the podium.
Yeah, so I think that he answered it and shouldn't, and said the wrong stuff, and so I mean I give Bob Bowlesby credit for at least going on there and admitting he messed up in that answer, admitting that they probably need to have a conference championship game, and acknowledging that they're going to have to think about their structure and their process for determining a champion. And, I give him credit for that, but it was kind of funny to see all of that come back because I remembered asking the question. I'd sort of forgotten, though, about the story until I started seeing people tweet it last night. So, but I also need to say though that him saying we wish we would have known, it's not about me asking the question, it's just about common sense. Of course it was going to make a difference. Maybe not every year. If TCU or Baylor was undefeated, it wouldn't have made a difference. They would have got in undefeated. But of course it would make a difference if you have one-loss teams. Of course it would. That's why I asked the question.
Yeah. Definitely. And going back to the four and the selection of the four playoff teams, I sort of sat down this morning before the selection was made, and I put this on Twitter so that, I wouldn't get on here and talk about it without having made it public before. But I thought Ohio State deserved the fourth spot behind Florida State, Oregon, and Alabama. You look at the loss to Virginia Tech they had early in the season, there's no denying that was the worst loss out of the three teams that were considered for that fourth spot. TCU lost to Baylor 61-58 in a game we talked about a lot. Baylor lost to West Virginia by 2 touchdowns. West Virginia was a solid team. That game was on the road, but Ohio State's loss to Virginia Tech is indefensible. But you look beyond that, best wins. Ohio State, I think, had the best win of the group. A 59-0 win against Wisconsin yesterday in the Big Ten championship game. Say what you want about the Big Ten, but that is impressive. Baylor's best win was the wild win over TCU. TCU beat K-State. You look second best wins. Ohio State beat Michigan State on the road. Baylor beat Kansas State by 9 last night. TCU beats Minnesota 30-7. That one is one where you could say, did OU's loss last night make a difference? because you could certainly make the argument, and you'd probably be right, had Oklahoma beat OSU and Bedlam, that would be the second best win, and that would vault them up a little bit on that totem pole, or at least make it closer. And you also look at non-conference scheduling. Ohio State, their non-conference schedule was pretty tough, all told. I mean, people laugh at Cincinnati and Kent State and Navy to go along with Virginia Tech, but I mean those are three programs, leaving out Kent State out of the four, that have a chance to be solid year to year.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you just summed it up pretty well. I mean, Ohio State was in my opinion the best of those three and deserved the playoff spot. I don't think that TCU or Baylor really. I mean, they had a case, but I don't think that you can say that they definitely deserve to go in over Ohio State, particularly with the lack of a conference championship game. So, I mean, and I thought Gary Patterson was just first class in the way he handled it today on ESPN, and then apparently in the press conference, which I didn't see. I just was seeing some quotes from it. What he said on ESPN was, "Hey, if we wanted to get in, we should have been undefeated," and that's exactly right. And frankly, I contrast that with Art Briles and the way he's handled it. And I don't want to sit here and badmouth Art Briles, but I will say that Gary Patterson has been all class about it, and that's good to see, because that's the only way to handle it. I don't see what possible good it does to get out and start bashing the committee or questioning their motives or questioning their biases. I mean, all you're doing is making sure that next year, if there's another debate that involves you, you're not getting in.
Yeah, and I know you said you didn't want to bash Art Briles, but a surprising thing to me last night in his press conference, and I thought most of Art Briles' press conference last night was wildly entertaining and very supportive of his case, but the separating themselves from the Big 12 was really surprising after their win last night.
Yeah, I mean it's just been a bad, I think, couple of days for him.
What, going back to the One True Champion slogan, has there been a worse slogan for a company or an idea or a league than One True Champion? Can you think of one? I mean, it's like BP coming out after the oil spill a couple years ago and saying, everybody loves tar balls. One True Champion.
I don't know if it's quite like that. I did just think of one. Papa John's saying better ingredients, better pizza. That's just not okay.
You don't think Papa John's has excellent ingredients?
No, I think that they're. I don't enjoy their pizza. So better. I had to look it up while you were talking. Better ingredients, better pizza. Papa John's might be worse than One True Champion.
You just have to shill for Pizza Shuttle since it's your favorite place.
Well, they're not in competition with Pizza Shuttle. We're talking about chains. Of all the chains, it's clear which one's the worst, and it's not the one with the best one is not the one with the slogan "Better ingredients, better pizza."
So, what is the best chain pizza as we get off the rails here a little bit?
I'm sorry. What was
best
that?
chain pizza.
I like Domino's.
I like Domino's.
Domino's is way better than Papa John's.
Yeah. I like.
I'm sorry if there are any Papa John's employees or anything that listen to this, but
no, I'm completely with you on that argument. I generally go with Pizza Hut, or there's a Mazzio's and a Marco's right down the road. So I like all. Of course, I like pizza. Period. It's one of my favorite foods in the world.
Yeah.
But what do you think about the bowls that did get set up by the College Football Playoff Committee outside of the four? A couple really intriguing ones for the Big 12 with Ole Miss and TCU in the Peach Bowl and Baylor and Michigan State in the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, I think that those – I sort of was hoping they would put Baylor and TCU in a rematch in the Cotton Bowl. I thought that would have been fun. I think that would have been a blast, actually, for a month of Gary Patterson and Art Briles politicking and the fans that already hate each other getting so much more fired up. And you just know that Bryce Petty would say something funny.
Played in the Cotton Bowl.
Played in the Cotton Bowl. I mean, it would have been pretty sweet. And Texas already thinks that they're another country anyway, so they could just play for their own national championship in Arlington. But but anyway, so I think that would have been fun. But I think the matchups are good. What I will say is I think that TCU has a better chance to prove itself against Ole Miss really than Baylor does against Michigan State. Because Michigan State's a good team. They're a good, solid team. But their 2 games where they played against the playoff teams, they didn't just lose. I mean, they got beat pretty good. So Ole Miss beat Alabama and beat Mississippi State. So I think that I would say that TCU has a better chance to really make itself look good. Having said that, though, if Baylor beats Michigan State worse than the other 2 did, then maybe the case. This is a good Big Ten versus Big 12 thing.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned Bryce Petty and his tendency to say interesting things. I thought he had the quote of the day yesterday. After the game, he was asked about Baylor's playoff chances. He said, that question is above my pay grade, which raises some eyebrows to begin with. Then he said, all I'm not paid to do is play.
Yeah, that was really good. That was really good. Bryce Petty's a pretty funny guy.
Yeah, he is. And, it's enjoyable to listen to him, and it's also enjoyable to listen to Art Briles, regardless of sometimes that his stuff goes off the tracks. But I really hope that Baylor reevaluates their scheduling philosophy.
They probably will. I mean, they may say they won't, but they probably will.
Yeah, I think they've got to. I think there's no doubt about that. Now they've got Incarnate Word on the schedule here in a few years, and some other cream puffs. I think Duke is the only Power 5 team that's on their schedule for the foreseeable future.
Don't badmouth Duke though. I like Duke.
Hey, Duke is a good football team right now, but historically,
I'm just kidding.
Not so much. But all right, well, that's all the time we have for today on this Sunday night. Jason and I will be back maybe later in the week for another round of the Nonfiction Writers, but you can check us out every day at newsok.com and every morning in the Oklahoman for the best OU coverage anywhere.